By
You
my
have to.
count, in this interview, we have identified six different serious mistakes.
Yeah,
Whether they are to do with judgments, whether they are to do with the way cases are assigned to particular courts, whether they are to do with courting publicity and giving interviews, or whether they are to do with inviting the Prime Minister for Ganpati Puja. Six serious mistakes in the course of 2 years as Chief Justice is not a very happy record.
no, it isn't. It isn't. But at the same time, you have to give him credit for, getting deciding a large number of constitution bench cases, which no chief justice has done in the last
Absolutely.
century.
Absolutely. That credit is his due.
Yeah,
But
and I think that's a very major contribution to India's jurisprudence.
absolutely. But what you can't escape from is also the side by side conclusion that his 2 years as Chief Justice were riddled with serious mistakes.
Yeah, yeah, you can't.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Yesterday, the 10th of November, Justice Chandrachud retired after 2 years as Chief Justice of India. His was an unusually high profile term in office. He attracted a lot of attention both within the court as well as outside of it. But what sort of Chief Justice was he? Did he live up to expectations or has he disappointed his peers? Today, I shall attempt to assess Justice Chandrachud's Chief Justiceship with one of the most highly regarded former judges of the Supreme Court and presently a judge of the Supreme Court of Fiji, Justice Madan Lokur. Justice Lokur, yesterday on the 10th of November, Justice Chandrachud retired after serving 2 years as Chief Justice of India. There were great expectations of him when he took over. In your eyes, has he lived up to them or has he disappointed you?
Yes, Karan, for inviting me for the show. Yes, you're right. There were a lot of expectations from Chief Justice Chandrachud. And the reason for that is that, things were, in a sense, getting out of hand. Things were happening, judges were talking in different voices. There was no cohesiveness in the Supreme Court. So, because of the long tenure that Chief Justice Chandrachud was expected to have 2 years, there were a lot of expectations that he will bring about some stability in the functioning of the Supreme Court. And to an extent, yes, he did bring the temperature down, so to speak. Um, but again, things were not. I mean, I, I suppose there will always be some difference of views in the courts, but the chief justice has a dual function. He is not only a person who is there as a judge, all right, for deciding cases, but he's also an administrator. Okay, so as a judge, Justice Chandrachud did a good job in the sense that there were a large number of constitution bench cases that were pending. There still are, but he managed to set up constitution benches and get rid of quite a few of them. Some of 5 judges, 7 judges, 9 judges. So to that extent, yes, he did a good job. Again, within those judgments, those constitution bench decisions, there were controversies which are bound to be there. But as an administrator, there I think he, kind of did not, ensure that the temperature comes down. In the sense that there were, all kinds of things said about the registry of the Supreme Court. That is to say that cases were being listed at the whims and fancies of the registry, or they were not being listed. They would go from one bench to another bench, and all kinds of things were happening. Um, there, I think he did not bring the temperature down because that situation continued. and lawyers often spoke about it, that, why is my case not being listed? Litigants also started making a noise. So there, I think I am, quite positive.
So you're saying that as an administrator, he disappointed.
Yes, yes. As an administrator, he disappointed me, definitely. Yes.
Tell me something. The administration of the court is one of the more important aspects of the Chief Justice's role. How significant is his disappointment?
There are two things. There are three things actually. One is as the master of the roster. Okay. That is to say that the Chief Justice assigns cases to different benches. Okay. Now, this is the exclusive jurisdiction of the Chief Justice, who is the master of the roster. Now, there have been, people talking about it, lawyers talking about it, that how come, a certain set of cases or a certain kind of cases are going to a particular bench. Okay. We had that same problem, if you remember, I was, of course, one of them, the so-called press conference that we had, I think in January 2018, where, cases were going to a particular bench. I think that same thing, started creeping in during his tenure. That's one aspect, the master of the roster. The second aspect is, management of the registry. Okay, where case listing has been a huge problem. I mean, lawyers have complained about, cases not being listed or cases being listed when they were not supposed to be listed. There have been instances of judges, saying in open court that, why has this case not been listed? We had given a direction that the case should be listed today. It is not listed. And if you remember, one of the senior judges, in fact, the senior most judge, Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, a case was supposed to be listed before his bench, but it was not listed. And he said, well, I think things are best left unsaid.
Just for the clarity of the audience, I'll point out that was a case to do with the collegium, and at a time when the government was asked to respond to questions, and it seems as if the case not only was not listed, but handed to another bench thereafter.
Well, it has never come up after that. So, I don't know whether it's been handed over to another bench, but it's not come up after that. It was about the appointment of judges. Okay. So these are two very, very important things which are directly connected with the Supreme Court. The third administrative aspect is, you're supposed to be the head of the judiciary. The Chief Justice traditionally is known as the head of the judiciary. Of course, all high courts are independent. They're not subservient to the Supreme Court in that sense. But as the Chief Justice of India and as the head of the judiciary, I would imagine that, the Chief Justice would take the Chief Justices of the high courts to, into confidence and say that, listen, there are things that are happening over there which should not happen, or there are things that should happen but are not happening over there. For example, you're getting some crazy orders that have been passed by the courts. So, look at judicial education, for example, in the district courts, so that judges are able to give a balanced view of, what is happening. There have been instances where the proceedings in the courts have gone out of hand. So there, as the senior most judge in the country, and as a person who is supposed to be the head of the judiciary, I think it would be his duty to, guide the chief justices of various high courts and, tell them how better to manage their courts.
Of the three areas that come under administration of the judicial system or the Supreme Court, it seems to me that two are lapses in the case of Justice Chandrachud's handling that must be deliberate. I'm talking about cases going to particular benches rather than to other benches. That has to be deliberate. He's master of the roster. He takes the decision himself. And also, this question of the registry either not listing cases or removing them and, not listing them properly. Again, that has to be deliberate. It can't be accidental. And when it comes to the third aspect, which is the relationship with the other chief justices of the high courts and not speaking to them, that possibly could be neglect, but it's very strange that someone of his intellect and his general awareness would neglect to do this. So it does seem as if all three lapses are deliberate lapses, things that he deliberately chose not to do or to do.
Yes, that's one way of looking at it. Actually, I don't know, whether it appears that, the Chief Justice says that, listen, this particular case should go before this bench. All right. From what I have read in the newspapers, it has happened, that the Chief Justice has deliberately said that this case should go before this particular bench, or that this case should be taken out from a particular bench. I gave the example of Justice Call. All right. Then you had the instance of, the cutting of trees in Delhi. All right. Issues of the environment in Delhi. Cases have been taken out from a particular bench. That would be deliberate. That registry can't, they don't have the guts to do it. So that would be deliberate. So yes, but as the head of the registry, as the person who's in charge of the registry, the Chief Justice should be aware of this. Even if he does not do it deliberately, he should definitely be aware of it and should pull up the registry and say, what are you guys doing?
And he failed to do that.
And he seems to have failed to do that. Yes.
Do you suspect that some of these deliberate decisions to take away cases were politically motivated?
I don't know, but like taking out the case from Justice Sanjay Kishan Paul's bench recently, I think yesterday or day before or something, the Chief Justice made a statement in an interview that he believes that the appointment of judges should not be taken up on the judicial side, right? Now, that's his personal view. And if that is his view, that explains why he took it away from Justice Paul, because that was before him on the judicial side. Okay. Now, you can't let your, personal views, dominate the listing of cases. The least that could have been done in a situation like this, and let me tell you, the case before Justice Call was not the first time that a case like this had come up before a judge of the Supreme Court or before a bench of the Supreme Court. It's been there for quite some time. And in fact, even when Justice Thapar was the Chief Justice of India, he had mentioned about it in court. So I'm talking about, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So to take it out on the ground that I don't think, this is something which is justiciable or which should be dealt with on the judicial side is certainly not correct.
And given that he's primus inter pares, the first amongst equals, but not superior in any way, to impose his views on a fellow judge, and it happened to be the second senior judge of the time, is also presumably wrong.
Wrong. Yes. Yeah. The least he could have done is, tell Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul or talk to the bench, whoever the judges were, that listen, this is how I feel. I leave it to you because the case is before you. But this is how I feel, and let them decide whatever they want to do. They may have a different point of view, fine. But you should not interfere in the judicial functioning of the judge.
But you're saying something else that's very important. Not only was the decision to arbitrarily take it away wrong because he was imposing himself and he's only primus inter pares, he's not superior, but also, if it had to be done, there were more discreet ways of doing it, a quiet word, an explanation, and that would be the test of leadership. He failed that test as well.
Yes, you're right. But first of all, he should not have done this. And if he felt compelled for whatever reason to do it, the normal thing would be to talk to a judge. I mean, that's how you handle the court. I was Chief Justice of Guwahati High Court when 7 states in the Northeast came under the jurisdiction of the Guwahati High Court. Judges were reluctant to go, to other states, for 2 weeks at a time. Senior judges said, why should we get dislocated? But I talked to them, and I told them that, listen, it's good for the image of the court. It's good for the people of the state. I mean, you're not going to a foreign country or something. So having a dialogue with judges, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and it should be encouraged.
In which case, this amounts, in your eyes, to quite a terrible, serious mistake on his part.
As a leader, yes. As a leader and as an administrator.
So as a leader and as an administrator, it's a serious, terrible mistake.
Yeah, not terrible, but serious, yes.
Okay. Let's at this point, Justice Lokur, come to some of the significant judgments delivered by the Supreme Court whilst Justice Chandrachud was Chief Justice of India. First, there's the Article 370 judgment. The court upheld the government's abrogation, and although it had concerns about the removal of statehood, it didn't order its restoration. Instead, it was prepared to trust the government to do that. How do you evaluate this judgment?
I have written about it at that point of time. I think a very important question that arose and which was ducked, so to speak, was whether a state could be converted into a union territory. Right? Now, that's a very important question. You see, you look at it like this. Today we have elections in a large state like Maharashtra. Okay, I hope it doesn't happen. But supposing the government decides that, we're going to divide Maharashtra into 3 union territories because of administrative reasons or something. Can the government do that? Does the Constitution permit something like that? That is a very important question that was not answered. And what the court said was, we'll look at it at the appropriate time. Now, the appropriate time can only happen when it the appropriate time will come only when it happens again. So, are you going to wait for this thing to happen again and then take a call that no, this is not permissible, or it is permissible, whatever? So, I think there, this aspect was left out, which I think should have been squarely dealt with.
You're saying one of the most important aspects of the matter that was in front of the Supreme Court was ducked. The Supreme Court deliberately chose not to look into it and to say they'll do it at the appropriate time. But the time that they had was the appropriate time because that power had just been exercised and the Supreme Court was required to judge whether that power was exercised rightly or wrongly. So this was more than a mistake. This is, in a sense, letting down the people of Jammu and Kashmir, possibly.
Yeah. You see, I mean, the question was before the court, right? Why was it not answered? Can you say, no, I'll answer it later, if the situation arises again? It's before you answer it.
The answer could have ended up being embarrassing to the government. Is that possibly one reason why they didn't answer it and chose to do so later?
I don't know. It's anybody's guess. Why they didn't answer it, it's anybody's guess.
But the terrible thing about this whole matter is that they have themselves given rise to the question I put to you.
Yeah. That's right. Absolutely.
And it's not in the interest of the court or of the Chief Justice that question should be asked, has he buckled under some form of political pressure? That undermines the image of the judiciary.
Yeah, you see, it's like this. It's happened in this case, right? Now, you may have another case of seminal importance. May not necessarily be, converting a state into a union territory. But you could have other issues, constitutional issues of seminal importance. Can you say, listen, I'll wait for this situation to arise again, and then I'll decide it? Because then you can keep ducking constitutional issues and say, sorry, I'm not going to answer it.
And
You
for
know,
the Supreme Court to duck constitutional issues is again a terrible lapse of duty.
yeah, absolutely. You're right. You're right.
The second big judgment was about electoral bonds. The Supreme Court got a lot of praise for declaring them unconstitutional and striking them down, but it stopped short of recovering the money or punishing anyone. Again, how do you view this judgment?
The follow up was again important, right? That you had some, entities giving, one entity gave, I think, 1,000 crores worth of electoral bonds to a particular political party. Another one gave 500, 600, whatever. Where did they get the money from? That's an important question. You had entities who were shell companies. Okay, where did they get the money from? Who was the backbone of that shell company? You had companies who were running into losses. Where did they get the money from? These are questions that should have been answered. Okay, I don't know whether they were raised in the first instance, but they were certainly raised in the second instance when an application was filed before the Supreme Court, saying that, listen, why don't you have an SIT or CBI or whatever, look into this. And the Supreme Court did not do it. Okay, they said, no, we're not going to do it. Now, this time they didn't say we'll wait for this thing to happen again. I don't know why they said no, but you have the old saying, operation is successful, but the patient is dead. Okay, so you struck down the electoral bonds, but the follow up, which was equally important, did not take place.
Once again, questions are asked. When an equally important follow up doesn't take place, is the reason some form of political fear or apprehension that the consequences will be embarrassing to the government of the day? Because the major beneficiary, the preponderant beneficiary of those bonds was the BJP.
Yeah, but it's the question really in a situation like this is not embarrassment for the government. It is, you talk about money laundering. Okay, I mean there's so many cases of money laundering, people getting arrested and all that. It's an important question for everybody to know, including the government, to know where did these guys get this kind of money. It's I don't think it'll embarrass the government. I don't think it'll embarrass the BJP. I don't think it'll embarrass any political party. But it is in the interest of transparency to know where did these people get this kind of money, and how is it they have so much money to spare? I mean, 1,000 crores is not a small amount.
What we've established so far, Justice Lokur, is that in the two very important judgments we're talking about, the Article 370 judgment, which also included the question of the bifurcation of Jammu and Kashmir into two and the demotion of the state to union territory status, and secondly, in the electoral bond judgment, in both cases, critical follow-ups didn't happen. We don't know fully why they didn't happen. People have their suspicions. There may be political motivation behind those follow-ups not happening. But when Supreme Courts of the country repeatedly now, it seems, fail to follow up the logic of their own decisions, it's worrying and concerning because it's inadequate what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, the law is meant to be implemented. Okay, I think that's pretty basic. So when you laid down the law, you must have that follow up. Otherwise, there's no point in saying this is what the law is and so what.
So what we're concluding is that in both critical cases, the Supreme Court under Justice Chandrachud simply didn't go far enough. For whatever reason, it didn't go far enough, and therefore it didn't do full justice to the matter.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it didn't go far enough. I mean, it didn't go the distance that it was expected to go.
Which is even worse. It was expected to go and didn't go that full distance.
Yeah.
Now, there's also an issue, a long pending issue before the Supreme Court, which Justice Chandrachud did not take up. And once again, it has to be a deliberate decision on his part not to take it up. I'm referring to the challenge to the Citizenship Amendment Act. What message did his decision not to take it up during his tenure send out?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if one has to be, fair to him, there were many cases, many constitution bench cases, which were taken up. Okay, this one was important. It was very, very important. The Citizenship Amendment Act. You had that Shaheen Bagh, syndrome, not only in Shaheen Bagh but all over the country. So there is no doubt about it that it was a very important constitutional issue and a live issue. Okay, so it should have been taken up. In my view, it was very important to have taken it up. Why they didn't take it up? Again, your guess is as good as mine. But yeah, it should have been taken up.
So it was a mistake not to take it up.
Yeah, it was a mistake not to take it up. Because that has given rise to the temperature to an extent. Okay.
Also, it's a case that at least India's 200 million Muslims believe dangles over their heads like a sword of Damocles. Whether they're right or wrong in that belief is another matter, but it's made them apprehensive, anxious, and concerned. And with them in mind, it should have been taken up to clarify the situation.
Yeah, I think it should have been taken up not only with the Muslims in mind, but for the entire country in mind. I mean, the country also wants to know, isn't it? What is the law? Is the CAA valid or is it not valid? It's not only one section of people who want to know. I think the whole country wants to know.
Would you call this a serious mistake?
It was a serious mistake. Yeah.
Would this be a terrible mistake?
Not terrible. I mean, terrible is a very strong word.
But serious.
Serious, yes. If you remember the Shaheen Bagh incident happened all over the country. It's not that it was confined to the north, where there's a large population of Muslims. It was all over the country. So it is something which impacted the country as a whole, and therefore it should have been taken.
Before I move to other matters, let me raise a fourth judgment. But I readily acknowledge that Justice Chandrachud was not Chief Justice when it was delivered. I'm referring to the Ayodhya judgment, but we now know he authored it, although he never signed it. Did that judgment, in your eyes, deliver justice, or do you agree with the criticism that it was one-sided and that it found in favor of those it deemed guilty of illegally demolishing the mosque in the first place?
Yeah, it's like this. People make mistakes, okay, and the courts can condone it. But this was not, a mistake in that sense. This was the demolition of the Ram Janambhoomi was not a mistake. It was something that was deliberate. And that should have been kept in mind. I don't think the court kept that in mind. Okay, they kind of forgot about it and said, yeah, it's been done, criminal case is pending, that will decide whatever there is. But again, the logical follow-up to a fact situation was not there. So in that sense, again, there was a mistake that a certain set of facts points to a particular conclusion, right? And that conclusion leads us to believe, on the basis of those facts, that the demolition was wrong. And perhaps, there was no temple or whatever. And therefore, this is the way we have decided.
Let me put this to you, Justice Lokur. Do you really believe that the Supreme Court forgot or overlooked the fact that this is not a mistake you can condone, that it was deliberate and it was done with defiance? Or, once again, would you accept that this raises the question, did they choose to forget because the consequence of remembering would have led to a judgment or a ruling that would embarrass the government, or at least annoy the government?
Yeah. I think the words that you have said, they chose to ignore it or they chose to overlook it, is, I think, correct. Yeah, that's the right way to put it. Why they did that? Why they did that is really it's difficult for me to say.
Once again, you called it a mistake. Would this be a serious mistake?
Yes, yes, yeah. The constitution benches can't make small mistakes. Constitution benches, if they make a mistake, it has to be a serious mistake. You're interpreting the Constitution of India.
So we've identified three serious mistakes. Two,
Yeah.
two in judgments that he authored as Chief Justice, and one in the Ayodhya judgment, which he authored as just an ordinary judge of the Supreme Court. But three serious mistakes.
Yes.
That
Karan, I think we have to be clear. The Constitution of India is supreme. You cannot interpret it wrongly. And if you do, you're committing a mistake, a serious mistake.
Moving away, Justice Lokur, from judgments, let's come to the behavior of the judicial system under Chief Justice Chandrachud's Chief Justiceship. People like Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam continue to languish in jail for years without bail. That's also true of many of the Bhima Koregaon accused. How much of the responsibility or blame for the way they've been treated rests with Justice Chandrachud himself?
That rests with the master of the roster. Okay. So we come back to that, original point that cases were being sent to a particular bench. All right. Now, all judges are equal. One doesn't even need to say it. All judges are equal. So why is it that a particular set of cases goes to a particular judge and not to any other judge? Is there a reason for it? And if there's no reason for it, it's too much of a coincidence that all these cases go before a particular judge all the time. Once in a while, yes, but not all the time.
So there's a real sense in which people who deserve bail and should have got bail but have been denied it for years actually were denied bail because cases were given to benches in such a way that those benches were reluctant to give them bail. That, again, at least through the eyes of the people affected, would look deliberate, if not malicious.
Yeah, it would look deliberate, but it's not only one bench. This has happened in more than one bench. Okay. And the Chief Justice should be in a position to identify and know those benches. Now, take the case of this Arnab Goswami. All right, that was dealt with by the Chief Justice. Okay, how come that was dealt with by the Chief Justice and Umar Khalid's case was not dealt with by the Chief Justice? Is there any particular reason for that? So these questions are bound to arise. How come Arnab's case was not sent to that particular bench? You when you're the master of the roster, you have to, distribute cases dispassionately. It would be somebody's bad luck if his case goes before a bench which is not inclined to give bail. Okay, can't help it. But or it might be good luck if it goes to another particular bench. But now you see that swing is taking place. If you have noticed in the last month or 2 months, a lot of people are getting bail. Why? Because the trial is not going to be concluded.
The truth is, Justice Lokur, you've raised a very important point. The Chief Justice, in interviews that he's given, took great pride in the fact that he gave bail to Arnab Goswami. If I recall correctly, his words were, "I've given bail from A to Z." But he did it personally, and by aligning or assigning cases in such a way, he presumably ensured that other people, equally deserving, if not more deserving of bail, like Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam or the Koregaon Bhima accused, would not get bail. And that is surely something that people will remember as unfairness on his part.
Yeah, it's very difficult to understand why this happened. You gave bail from A to Z. I don't think he said A and Z. I think he said A to Z, but he forgot you in between. That's Umar Khalid. So These are questions that are bound to be asked, you know. And yeah, so you have to be very, very careful and take your judges into confidence. I mean, you can't say that, listen, I'll do what I think is right. I don't care what you think, You
At
have
this
to.
point, you're also establishing failure to take judges into confidence, whether they're fellow judges on the Supreme Court or whether they're High Court Chief Justices. That's another lapse on his part. He didn't do that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, those judges are your colleagues. Okay, there's no harm in talking to them. There's no harm in discussing things with them. You can't, take the court along by not discussing issues with them.
In the case of the election officer in Chandigarh who was found guilty of criminal misbehavior, no action was taken against him. That's also true of the Shinde Fadnavis Ajit Pawar government in Maharashtra, which was deemed to be illegal, but the matter was tossed back to the speaker who did nothing, and the government ended up serving its term. How do you view these outcomes?
Again, a failure of follow-up. Okay. The natural consequence would have been to take action against that Chandigarh, election officer. The natural consequence of the Maharashtra judgment would have been to say that, listen, you get back. Okay, that's what I think. Of course, the court thought otherwise. They said that, because he's resigned, he can't come back. But okay, he's resigned, but he resigned under certain circumstances. You know, would that be a valid sort of a resignation? Or could there be a third solution, rather than the one that was followed now? Say, all right, everything that's happened is wrong. The fresh elections should be called right now. There are different possibilities. And yeah, follow up is important, in every case, whether it's constitutional or civil or criminal, it's important. You can't convict a man for murder and say that, listen, okay, I'm not sending you to jail. It can't be like that.
We've just established in critical cases 5 altogether, 3 judgments, as well as the Chandigarh issue and the Maharashtra government issue. In all 5, there was failure to follow up. Critical follow up, which was necessary, which was required, which was expected, did not happen.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. You're right. It should have happened, but did not.
At the very least, I presume this is negligence.
Yes, well, I wouldn't say negligence, but it's failure of your duty.
Failed to do his full duty.
Yeah.
That's pretty damning, isn't it, for a judge?
Well, in the sense that, I mean, there are different kinds of failures, but failure to do your duty in the follow-up of the judgments. You can't just leave it, hanging in midair. In that sense, it's a failure.
Now, let's come to another aspect of Justice Chandrachud. Justice Chandrachud, as Chief Justice, found a lot of time for the media and civil society. He gave lots of public lectures, interviews. He even attended Express Adda and acted as a guest editor for the Times of India. As a result, he's been dubbed a celebrity judge. This was very different to any of his predecessors. Do you view this as a welcome initiative on his part, or do you think this was a mistake?
I think it's too early to judge. I don't know. Frankly, I don't know what's going to happen if every Chief Justice, whether of the Supreme Court or of every High Court, decides to go around, giving all kinds of lectures and attending all kinds of functions. What is going to be the consequence of that? I can't imagine for myself. I can't imagine a good consequence. It's one thing to say that, yeah, the court is an open court, but there are certain things which, you have to stay away from. So if you're going to have every Chief Justice of every High Court saying, all right, because the Chief Justice of India has, attended Express Adda, we will also have, some function where people will be called for interviews and so on and so forth. I really don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. One of the consequences of that would be, if a judge makes a statement which can have an impact on a judgment that is likely to come up before him, or a case that is likely to come up before him, it can have serious consequences there, because there would be a conflict of interest. There would be an allegation of bias. These things can happen.
So this is a very unfortunate precedent that he set.
Yeah, as it appears today, yeah, it looks not good.
You began by saying you didn't want to call this a mistake or a welcome initiative, but now it seems that he set a precedent that it'll be very unfortunate, and therefore it sounds as if he's made a mistake in setting this precedent.
Yeah, it's like this, like I said, I don't know what the consequence of this is going to be, but I don't visualize a good consequence. Okay, so if it does not lead to a good consequence, it's an error, it's a mistake, or it is something that should have been thought through, that this is what is going to happen. You have, the Chief Justice of some state X, and he says that, say Maharashtra, Bombay High Court. Okay, elections are going on. Jharkhand High Court elections are going on. The Chief Justice comes out and starts holding interviews and says something in favor of one of the political parties. What is the consequence of that? I think that the consequence is not good. Why I say the consequence is not good is that it could have a snowballing effect. And the moment you have a snowballing effect with other Chief Justices of the Supreme Court or other Chief Justices of different high courts, going around, giving all kinds of lectures, speaking to all kinds of people, it certainly is not going to be good.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
There are also things that he said and did as Chief Justice that have caused a lot of concern. I'm referring to him inviting the Prime Minister to his home for Aarti for Ganpati Puja, and the claim that God gave him the solution to the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi dispute. He's faced a lot of criticism for this. Some would say he's actually faced humiliation as well. The question I want to ask you is, was that criticism, was that personal attack on him justified?
Well, speaking for myself, I would not have, by the way, I do celebrate Ganesh Aarti. I would not have called the Prime Minister or any, big shot politician. I would not have called any politician at all. Okay. So I think it was wrong on his part to have done that. Okay. The other thing, what was the other thing you said?
Claiming that God gave him the solution to the
okay.
Babri Masjid dispute.
Yeah, listen, everybody says prayers, okay, unless you're an atheist. You don't go around telling everybody that, listen, this is what I prayed for, I mean, unless you're saying that I prayed for a boy or something, when you're having a child. But why say all this? It's totally unnecessary and uncalled for.
It smacks of a sort of lack of gravitas and judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Was inviting the Prime Minister for Ganpati Puja a serious mistake?
Yeah, it was. It was a serious mistake. Yes. It sends out the wrong signals, and it did. That's why there was this criticism.
By
You
my
have to,
count, in this interview, we have identified 6 different serious mistakes.
yeah,
Whether they are to do with judgments, whether they are to do with the way cases are assigned to particular courts, whether they are to do with courting publicity and giving interviews, or whether they are to do with inviting the Prime Minister for Ganpati Puja. 6 serious mistakes in the course of 2 years as Chief Justice is not a very happy record.
no, it isn't. It isn't. But at the same time, you have to give him credit for, deciding a large number of constitution bench cases, which no Chief Justice has done in the last.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That credit is his due.
Yeah,
But
and I think that's a very major contribution to India's jurisprudence.
absolutely. But what you can't escape from is also the side by side conclusion that his 2 years as Chief Justice were riddled with serious mistakes.
Yeah, yeah, you can't.
At Express Adda, he called the Aarti with the Prime Minister a simple meeting, adding, I think, on that occasion that no deals were cut. Does that explain what he did?
The court or the Chief Justice does not cut deals. So where is the question of saying no deals were cut? I mean, you're not supposed to cut deals. So really, I fail to understand that. You see, there are occasions when you meet the Prime Minister or the Chief Justice of India meets the Prime Minister. Today it happened. I'm sure the incoming Chief Justice of India must have met the Prime Minister. He met the President. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, because that is something, and it's an official function. It's the performance of your protocol. Okay, you could have a function in Vigyan Bhavan for the launch of something or the other, and you have the Prime Minister invited for that. You have the Constitution Day function, and where you call the President. Fine, you have a social. Not a social, but a formal meeting. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's part of the duties of the Chief Justice, as part of the duties of the President or the Prime Minister. But okay, also you could say for a wedding, the Prime Minister is known to you, so you call him, or the President is known to you, you call him. Or there's a tragedy in the family, and the Prime Minister calls on the person for condolence. Yes, but this does not fall in that category. And even if the Prime Minister or the President comes for a wedding, you don't cut deals with them. That's not a happy expression.
And what you're saying is you certainly should not be, when you are Chief Justice of India, inviting the Prime Minister to your home for Aarti, allowing it to be filmed and allowing the video to be disseminated widely throughout the country.
Yeah. Okay. Next time you call him for dinner. Is that okay?
And then you go see a movie with him.
Then you go and see a movie with him. Is that okay? Or you have a birthday party and you say, come along, and he comes with a present.
And once again, suppose Chief Justices at High Courts start consorting with Chief Ministers in their states in this way. Suppose junior judges or magistrates start meeting people at their level. Again, setting a precedent that would be terrible.
Yeah. That's why you have to look at the whole thing in the larger context. You have the Chief Justice of the High Court hanging around with the Chief Minister. You have the district judge, and there are 700 districts, hanging around with the collector or whoever is the top boss in the district from the executive.
It seems that in many cases, Justice Chandrachud did not think about what could be the consequences of the precedent he's setting.
Yeah.
Here we're talking about High Court Chief Justices in meeting with chief ministers or lower judges meeting with lower officials. Earlier, we talked about how High Court Chief Justices might follow his precedent or start giving interviews. In both cases, he failed to consider the consequences of the precedent he was setting. This has to be, as I said earlier, another lapse of judgment or lack of judgment.
Yeah. I think he should have, visualized the consequences.
Finally, in a recent speech in Bhutan, Justice Chandrachud asked this of himself. I'm quoting him. How will history judge my tenure? What legacy will I leave for future generation of judges and legal professionals? So let me put that question to you. How do you think history will remember him? What sort of legacy does he leave behind?
Well, like I said, so far as his legacy as a judge or a person who decides whether he's in the capacity of a judge or a chief justice, in some respects, namely deciding constitution bench cases, good. I would definitely give him credit for that. Not following up, not good. He should have followed up on many of these cases which we've discussed. As an administrator, legacy, I would say not good at all. Okay, I'm pretty clear about that. That's it.
In an interview this morning to the Times of India, I'm talking about in an interview on Monday the 11th, he said, and I'm quoting him, as Chief Justice of India, I left the system better than I found it. Do you agree?
In what way? In what way was it better? If you're looking at the number of cases that were pending 2 years ago, today the National Judicial Data Grid says that there are 82,000 cases pending in the Supreme Court. That's not better than what it was, 2 years ago. As far as I know, the Supreme Court did not cross 80,000 at that time. Today, as the head of the judiciary, we are looking at 51 million cases pending across the country. It was less than that 2 years ago. Appointment of judges. Okay, there are a large number of vacancies in the high courts and in the districts. So in what way, certainly in some ways it must be better than what it was. But I think we need to be clear, in what way was it better and in what way was it not better.
And there are significant ways in which it's not better. Pendency of cases has grown. I'm saying this from memory, but I believe it's gone up from roughly 66, 67,000 when he took over to 82,000 plus, as you cited a moment ago. The overall pendency of cases in the judicial system has gone up to, I think you said 51 million. Clearly, those are instances where the system is not better than before he found it. And also his treatment of the way the registry files cases, or his treatment of the way cases were allotted to particular benches, clearly suggests the system is not better than before he found it. So once again, there are serious question marks to his claim that he left the system better than I found it.
Yeah. There are serious question marks.
I thank you, Justice Lokur, for the time you've given me. I'm particularly grateful for the effort you put into analyzing Chief Justice Chandrachud's Chief Justiceship in terms of the cases and judgments he delivered, where often there was no required follow-up, though it was expected of him, but also the way you've analyzed his administration of the Supreme Court and in particular allocation of cases to benches and the handling of the registry. But finally, also the way you've helped us understand the things that he said and did, the number of interviews he gave, or the inviting of the Prime Minister to his home for Aarti. And the sad conclusion that although in many respects he was a good judge, but nonetheless his 2 years as Chief Justice is riddled with mistakes. We've identified 6, maybe 7 during the 2 years he was Chief Justice. That, I think, is particularly eye-opening for the audience. Thank you very much indeed. Take care.
One word. let's not also forget his contribution to the jurisprudence, constitutional jurisprudence of the country. That was yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Sir, stay safe.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.